Hello and welcome back to WTF MCP, where we talk what the MCP, I guess. Um, Last two episodes have been hobby focused, and this episode we're going to talk about getting prepped to go to a large event like Adepticon.
Mhm.
Yeah, so Tim, I think this is a great topic, and I'll let you kind of kick it off and like what should people expect when going to a large event?
Yeah, so I think your first time at a large event, you're going to realize pretty quickly, either midway or after your first couple rounds, it's like, oh man, I wish I had X, Y, or Z. Transportation of all of your tokens, your measurement sticks, your range finders,
Yep.
your models. Like, there's kind of a lot that goes into it. And my first several events, I showed up with a shoebox that had like a clamshell with all of my stuff in it, and stuff gets broken or stuff gets lost. You can't find things. And there's kind of a lot of different ways to organize that, but
Mm,
more importantly, making sure that you specifically are ready to kind of sit in one room, one area, in a couple chairs, and be still for what could be a couple hours, and making sure that you're comfortable, energized, not hungry, not irritable, and ready to go. Um,
yeah.
so I think those are kind of the big few. And before we started recording, you hit probably the biggest one, which is eat breakfast.
Yeah.
Do not rely on rounds working out so that everyone can go out and grab something to eat. Have some food on you. Have
Yep.
a protein bar. Have a shake, a beverage, a big whole thing of water. Not every event and not every store has a concession stand or a snack bar or something along those lines.
Or
Uh,
reasonably priced of any of those
oh,
items. Yeah.
for real.
Yeah.
Honestly, your most important like hobby purchase to go to an event is probably a small cooler or lunchbox that's insulated, so you can have cold water, you can keep a sandwich or something fresh, and you're good. You'd be surprised how often in that like round 3 or 4, or like at Adepticon this past year, the timeline event was 6 rounds, how
Uh,
you can be like, yo, I am irritable, I am forgetting stuff, I am like my mind is fatigued, and you'll misplay here or
yep.
there, or even worse, potentially have a bad experience that you're providing to your opponent. Um,
Yeah, and I think just to expand on that a little bit, one of the things you experience at an event like this is any event really, small or large, is that you go, oh, okay, there's gonna be a lunch break. Let's say it's at 1 o'clock, noon or one or whatever it is. Well, the thing that you don't realize is that during that time, like on your way to the event, you're like, "Oh, I'll just go grab food at this. I know there's a little place to eat right next door, whatever it
yeah.
is, right?" What you don't anticipate is talking. You end up
Mhm.
having conversations with people you just met, friends that you know, like especially at a bigger event, if you've been around for a while, like you'll see somebody while you're walking to the place to eat, and then you'll get distracted talking to them for 10 or 15 minutes, and now you've
Yep.
only got 20 minutes, you know what I mean? And so yeah, that's a big thing I've always from the Legion side, because we have long days too, is that like, hey, bring food, bring snacks, always bring water. Yeah, I always have a backpack, or inside my army bag I have at least four like bottles of water, or I know a lot of people bring like refillable jugs. The problem I have with that is there's not always time to go refill it.
Yeah.
And so if I just have a couple water bottles on me, I don't need to worry about that. I just drink, the water bottles. The other big one, I think, before we get into other specific stuff that I think a lot of people don't think about is footwear.
Yes.
Really comfortable shoes, sneakers, or whatever's comfortable to your feet and that you can stand a lot in.
Mhm.
That's what you want to wear. Like I know you want to come dressed as Star-Lord or as Kingpin or Crossbones or whoever. That's fine. Just wear sneakers, man. I'm telling you, like
Mhm.
you're gonna regret it if you don't.
Yeah, it's not a place to wear low-key shoes, with big curly points and, no sole whatsoever. Like,
Yeah.
wear comfy shoes and just have comfy shoes in bed, in general. Your quality of life will improve.
Yeah. And then like between rounds, I always recommend people sit. Just sit down. Like if people are talking to you, just have a seat, talk to them while you're sitting. You're because you're gonna need to sit because most games you're not sitting through because you're excited. You're standing up, you want to see the board, you're thinking through your next moves. And so every chance you get to sit, do it because it'll you just won't.
Yeah, it'll prolong your energy throughout the day too.
Yeah.
Like you'll prevent a lot of the wear on your feet. Because there's a huge difference between being able to be mobile and standing in one place for an extended period of
Right.
time. And based on your height and what the board height is, you might be more comfy sitting down. It might be more comfy to stand up,
Yep.
especially on a larger matted game like Legion over
Yep.
MCP. But yeah, and it improves your mood, like, and just being courteous and kind to your opponent
Yep.
and not being irritable goes a very, very long way to the
Right.
play experience.
At the end of the day, it's a game, and we need to just play it like a game, you know? And one thing I don't, from the Legion side, one thing I've always recommended is if when things get competitive, it gets contentious. It's just part of how
Hmm.
this works, right? So don't be afraid to call a judge over. If there's a call that you and your opponent can't agree on, you're not being a jerk. You're just getting an impartial third party to make the decision for you, so neither of you are the bad guy.
Yep.
There's always there's always something, like even when we played our teams tournament at Adepticon, which was super hyper friendly,
Hmm.
we had a couple judge calls because it was like so close on a range 4, and we neither of us knew what it actually was. Like one said, or it was a beam. That's what it was. Like we wanted to do a beam attack that didn't get one of our own guys in the beam, and so like it was like, okay, how do we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't,
Yeah.
and our opponent was like, no, I think you're getting at least one of your guys. We're like, I don't know, I think we could fit it right through here. And then we were just like, you know what? Let's just have a judge decide, and then
Yeah.
whatever they decide is what it is. And so I just recommend that. It's just, hey, just be like, go to your opponent, like, hey, let's just call a judge and have them decide, so we don't like have to deal with this.
And that's
Um,
probably the most common judge call, by the way, is
yeah,
range and line of sight, whether something has cover or not. So like take the weight off yourself, off of
yeah,
your opponent. That's what the judges and the TOs are there for. Um, and especially with like rules callings as well. There's
yeah,
updates to things and there's clarifications. And you might know the rules better or a particular interaction better than your opponent, or vice versa. Like you can talk it out, but if you're still uneasy, just call that
yeah,
judge.
yeah. Agreed 1,000%. And it doesn't, I know a lot of people are conflict averse, but it's not causing conflict. It's actually
It's an
fixing.
arbitration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fixing the conflict, and letting a third party make the decision so that no one is the bad guy.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And then
This
if it goes in your way and not, you'll be like, ah, yeah, stupid judge. Sorry, man, that sucks. You just blame it on them, and then you're not to blame at all.
exactly. And one thing too, I don't know how you handle this. I've seen it done in a couple different ways, but sometimes dice spike, and sometimes
Yeah,
they
yeah,
spike for the entire game.
yep,
If your dice are very poor, what do you like to hear, or do you not like to hear anything from your opponent? Like I've seen people be like, "Dude,
yeah,
listen, I'm sorry about your dice."
yeah.
That way, I'm acknowledging them, but sometimes that perturbs people as well.
Yeah, I think sorry, like I apologies aren't needed. It's more like
Mhm.
if my opponent's like, "Oh man, that sucks." Like that, I'm fine with that. Like even on the other end, if the dice are in my favor, if my opponent's like, "Son of a," like like
Yeah.
getting like, as long as it's not directed towards me and it's directed towards the dice, I think that's fine because we've all been there and we get it, right? We're like, "Yeah, man, that sucks, dude," and like we just all agree that it's the dice, right? But
Mhm.
as long as you're not, the anger that you're feeling, we all feel it. If you angle it towards the dice or towards fate or towards God or whatever you
Correct.
believe is making your dice roll that way, that's great. But not letting that bleed over into what your opponent's doing or anything that they say or being mad at them. They're
Mhm.
not doing it. It's the dice gods that are doing it to you.
My reaction is normally dice be dice, like whether
Yeah.
it's good or bad, and you set that precedent early, and it's like, listen, we have
Yeah.
no control over how
Right.
these wind up.
But I think it's okay to be a little agitated about it, just as long as
Yeah.
you're not like aiming it at your opponent and you're just going like, there's been times like, you roll dice, you get all blanks, you're like, oh, well, I guess they're gonna do that right now. Like, that's okay.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
okay, just as long as you're not like being like, well, oh, I guess your dice are just gonna be hitting all the time. That's when you're putting it on them, on your opponent, that's when it becomes a problem. But if you're just like swearing into the ether or
Mhm. Yeah.
that's okay. So
Onto some of the like objects that you can bring to kind of like
yeah.
help the speed of setup and teardown. there's a whole bunch of products out there, right, for organizing tokens and range rulers and models and stuff. But even as something as simple as going to Walmart and buying one of those big flat tackle boxes to just be able to sort everything out goes a long way,
Yeah.
especially if you're very quick at it. Having one big pile or a bag of all your 35 different tokens and objective markers and all that stuff. Yes, you can absolutely do that.
Hmm.
But just remember, like when you're actually trying to set up, you're trying to get those objectives on the board, you're trying to find that token. Time is important
Yep.
at an event. And you don't want to be wasting your own time, let alone your opponent's time, by digging through a giant, Walmart bag of
Right.
500 tokens to find the one specific shock token that you
Yeah.
need.
Yeah, I find with that this like a lot of things that help with jewelry sorry, with tokens is like jewelry,
Oh, yeah.
bead cases that you could get in like the jewelry section of Walmart or like Hobby Lobby or something. They have a little plastic case. They're usually like 5 or 6 inches wide by like 8 inches long or 8.5 inches long. And I
Yeah.
find they're just easy to put on the table. You can get all your tokens in there and you can just kind of grab them out. I think from a token carrying device, the smallest you can get and get your tokens and dice in there, the better, because you're gonna want it on the table and you don't want it to be obtrusive to other play areas, or not be able to set it on the table where you need to reach it
Yeah.
immediately, like, so any sort of like, what are those, they do those like beads, the like bead, they have little like
Like
plastic.
the perler bead things, kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they'll in the same aisle they have like little plastic trays that you can put the beads in, and I use those for tokens because they're small, they're easy to carry.
Well, and I think a quick tip too, is you don't have to bring every single token.
Yeah,
Make sure you have the tokens that are going to be applicable to the status effects that your characters have, the crises that you're bringing. You don't need to bring every crisis token. The
right.
generics have helped out a ton in the new
Yep.
core box because you can just have those two sets and then you're not digging to find the specific mutant madman token that no one
Right.
remembers what it looks like over a spider
Yep.
infected. The generics go a long way, but just making sure you have what you need to apply your effects and to be able to play your cards,
Yeah.
instead of bringing some giant thing filled with everything, because the footprint is very important.
Right.
And if you're going to a LGS and there's not a whole ton of room in between each table to put your stuff down, you're going to be really happy if you have like a layered or stacking thing where you can kind of access your stuff quickly.
Yeah, and I think too, like, one of the things I do is I look at my list and I say, okay, even at a high number, a high crisis number like 20 or whatever,
Mhm.
how many of my units am I really getting on the board? And then that's
Yeah.
just how many like activated tokens I bring, or how many days tokens I bring, or you know what I mean? It's like 5 or 6. And then that's it. That's all I need, because I'll never, generally won't have more than that on the board.
It's very rare to need more than six, unless
Yeah.
you're playing Dormammu or trying to run 10 two threats or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, for the most part, six is kind of perfect and probably a little extra than what you need.
Yeah, and like a lot of things, bleed or shock, stuff like that. There's generally only like one or two characters on your opponent's roster that do that. There's not a ton of like full lists that like everyone gives bleed, but even if there
Yeah.
is, like, so bringing like 4 3 4 bleed, 3 4 shock, like that generally is enough to like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Having some extra incinerate if demons
Yeah,
downtown is in your deck, or
yeah, yeah,
stun if
yeah.
you're running witnesses. Like just be aware of, when you're making your roster, be aware of what status effects you're
Yep.
gonna need and just have them on hand.
Yep. Yeah. I will say though, lots of wound and as many wound and power tokens as you can bring. So
And
that
the
is
bigger
yeah,
denominations of
yeah,
them
the
too.
threes and the
Like,
fives, yeah, for sure. Because
yeah.
those all get out of hand quick. So
Correct.
yeah.
Especially round two or three, like you get
Uh,
all of your things flipped and you're like, all right, well, everyone's stacked on power.
Everyone's got 10 power. Like, yeah,
Right.
I need 50 power right now. Yeah.
And depending on the event, making sure you have official tokens. There's a bunch of really awesome stuff out there.
Mhm.
But just before you sit down, agree with your opponent. This terrain is this size. These
Yep.
objectives mean this. Like a lot of that is a lot better when it's decided on before the game starts
Yeah.
versus when it just happens to come up and then having a disagreement or an argument at that point.
Well, and know when you're in an official event, if there's something that makes you uncomfortable, like your opponent's dice, if they're not official dice, or your opponent's movement or range rulers, if they're not official, you can request that they use uh actual.
Yeah. And that's pretty common in pretty much most tournament docs that like, listen, you can bring other stuff, but if your opponent prefers you to use the official stuff, have those on hand as well.
Yeah. And it's okay to ask that. Like, and I think
Hmm.
most, like, I found most opponents that use custom stuff, especially dice, will ask me if it's okay if they can use them.
Yeah.
You know, and if it's a tournament I don't care about, where I'm just like, yeah, we're just here to have fun, go ahead.
Mhm.
But like if it's something, I haven't run into this much, but where there's something on the line, then I'll be like, yeah, let's just use the official just to like cut any, especially like some of the dice that are custom are hard to read from far away. And so
Yeah.
like I'm just like, dude, I just it has nothing to do with what I think your dice are capable of doing. It has to do with the fact that I can't read them and I want to be able to, you know.
Hmm. Well, and shout out to award-winning painter Nick Keebler. He had at an event that we ran, I think you were both there, where he started asking people, "Hey, do you mind if we share dice?" That
Yeah,
kind of takes that like emphasis away of like his dice are hot because they're custom or they're from this person or
right.
that person. Sharing dice actually is a decent way to go about that because then you're both on the same playing field regardless of if they're official or not.
Well, and I think no matter who you are and how kind you are, there's always a moment in your brain when someone's dice are super hot and yours aren't as hot, where you start to think like, is there something with their dice? Like, am I missing something here? Because something's,
Yeah.
you know, and Keebler out of ever like we used to laugh at Keebler because he would always talk about how he had terrible luck with dice. And then I started playing him pretty consistently, and it is really true. His dice are
Yeah.
pretty awful. And so what it does for him is by sharing dice, it takes that nagging feeling that something's wrong with his dice off of his shoulders so that he can just play the game.
Mhm.
Because he knows we're using the same dice. So it's just going to be whatever it is for both of us, you know? And so that's something you can do, you know? And even like when movement tools and range tools, like if you're feeling uncomfortable with it because you don't really know their length, like even just measure it, like have an official set and just have them two
Yeah.
placed next to each other just so you know that they're the same length, you know? Like that's okay to ask just because be like, hey, I've never seen those. Can we just double check to make
Yeah.
sure it's the right? And I mean, really in this game, it doesn't really matter, but you know, everyone's gonna think that it matters, but
Yeah, there are so few situations where it's like, oh man, I am in fact half a millimeter out. That changes everything.
right.
Um, but
Yeah, that changed the entire game. It's just that's not how this game works. It's just like, oh, okay, I can't attack this turn. I'll do something else.
yep.
You know, like but that just leads me to believe like from a game style play standpoint, don't work on millimeters. Like make sure you're
Yeah.
well within range, you know, if you want to do something so that you're not like guessing. And, you know, and I know that comes out a lot when you get desperate, like towards the end of the game, you're just like, I gotta get up there and take this person out and get that crisis or extract, you know, and so like it can happen, but like try not to get to the point. It's like the same with there's a saying in Legion, it doesn't work as well in MCP, but don't ever put yourself in a position where the dice decide your fate because it's never going to go in your favor, right?
Right.
And so
Yep.
Legion, you can more there's more strategy in order to do that, but like you know same in MCP, don't ever rely on like a measurement that you know is going to be close to decide the fate of your game, right? Because
Correct.
it's always going to feel bad. So
Well, I think very much too, like that mentality helps a lot of people become better players because it has you thinking a little bit ahead instead of just kind of
right.
being reactionary to like, well, I didn't get quite there, so now I can only attack once, and now all the pressure's on this one roll instead of being able to attack twice or having
Right.
a charge or something along those lines. But that's just kind of as you get more experience in with the game, and especially at
Yeah.
events, like your play just kind of slowly improves.
And then before we leave, I think the final thing that I would offer up to play for players that are going to events, this is another like personal effects type thing, but layers.
Yeah.
So hoodie, t-shirt, jacket, like have layers because honestly, you never know what the temperature of the place is going to be.
Hmm.
It's unclear. It's either going to be a billion degrees or it's going to be freezing cold. Like it's always one or the other. So I always have, like, even during the summer, I'll pack a hoodie in my bag just because I'm like, I don't know when it's going to be here, you know.
Yep. Well, and I
So
think we're in upstate New York, right? Like both freezing and way too hot could be on the
yeah,
same day in June. Like
yep,
you just don't know.
yep,
Um, but yeah, I think that's a really good one too.
yeah,
And just revisiting that, have a backpack with some
yeah,
extra stuff in it and like, yeah. And give yourself time. Be to the event early.
mhm,
Allow yourself to leave a little bit earlier.
yep,
So you're not rushing in last minute trying to get set up. And
yeah,
when you're playing from behind time wise, it's never a good feeling and it kind of can color like the rest of your day. Um,
100%,
so
100%.
just be early.
Yeah, I think that's a good episode.
Yeah, same.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Join us next week on WTF MCP. Thanks, Tim.
Bye.